We're about to dive into one of the most bizarre and honestly unsettling clinical stories ever told. It's a story that kicks off with a super simple, everyday object and ends by questioning, well, everything you think you know about your own reality.
All right, take a good look at this. Seems like a dumb question, right? You see it, your brain clicks, and you just know it's a shoe. It's instant. It's automatic. But what if it wasn't?
Because believe it or not, for one truly brilliant man, that simple automatic act of recognition was completely gone. He could look at his own body and literally could not tell the difference between his shoe and his foot. And that is where this whole incredible story begins. Okay, Section 1, the world we trust. Look, every single second of every day, you place total faith in your brain. You trust it to be the architect of your reality. It takes in all the sights and sounds and builds the world you live in, and you probably never give it a second thought. And that leads to the central, kind of terrifying question here. What happens when that architect, your architect, makes a mistake? What happens when the world it's building for you just isn't right anymore? So, Section 2, cracks in perception. To really understand this, we need to meet a man known as Dr. P. And his world didn't shatter all at once. Nope, it started with these small, deeply weird cracks appearing in the reality he knew. So who was this Dr. P? Well, he was a distinguished musician, a really respected teacher, a charming, witty, sophisticated guy. By every measure, he had a brilliant mind, which, of course, made what happened next all the more baffling. It all started with these little things you might just brush off. He was at the music school where he taught, and he started having trouble recognizing his own students. I mean, he could see their faces, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, but the whole picture, the person, just wasn't coming together. He literally had to wait for them to speak to have a clue who he was talking to. From there, things got really strange. His brain started seeing faces that just weren't there. Picture this. He'd be walking down the street and would cheerfully pat a fire hydrant on the head as if it were a little kid. Or he'd talk to the carved knobs on furniture and be genuinely surprised when they didn't answer back. And this brings us right back to where we started. During a visit to the neurologist, Dr. P took off his shoe. He looked down and saw his own foot as if it were some strange object he'd never seen before. He was puzzled and actually started describing it before confidently declaring that it was his shoe. But maybe the most famous and unsettling example of his confusion happened as he was leaving. Dr. P was looking around for his hat. He saw his wife standing nearby, reached out his hand, took hold of her head, and tried to lift it off to put it on his own. He had mistaken his wife for a hat. All right, Section 3, when seeing isn't believing. So what in the world was going on inside his head? This wasn't madness. He wasn't blind. It was a very specific and very strange neurological condition called visual agnosia. The name visual agnosia actually comes from the Greek for a lack of knowledge. And here's the key. His eyes were working perfectly. The visual information was getting to his brain just fine. But the part of his brain that's supposed to look at that data and go, oh yeah, that's a face, or hey, that's a shoe, that part was offline. This is the absolute crucial difference between sensation and perception. Think of it this way. Sensation is like having all the raw ingredients, the flour, the sugar, the eggs. Perception is the baker who turns all that stuff into a cake. Dr. P had all the ingredients. He could see all the colors and lines and shapes, but the baker in his brain was gone. He couldn't assemble the parts into a cake. So what was his world actually like? Imagine looking at your friend's face, but instead of seeing them, you just see a jumble of parts. A nose here, two eyes over there, a mouth somewhere below. He saw all the features, but his brain couldn't put the puzzle together. He was living in a world that had been deconstructed piece by piece. His neurologist, Oliver Sacks, tested this by showing him a glove. Dr. P looked at it, turned it over, and described it in this purely abstract way. He said it was, quote, a continuous surface with 5 outpouchings. Now, he's not wrong, but it's such a completely alien way to see it. He could analyze the features, but he couldn't make that final leap to just glove. Now, his inability to recognize the faces of his students, or even his own wife, has a specific name, prosopagnosia. You might have heard it called face blindness. And you can imagine just how devastatingly isolating that would be. It essentially turns your world into a sea of strangers. So let's get to Section 4, an anchor of sound. Because Dr. P's story isn't just about what was lost. It's also this incredible story of adaptation. When his visual world completely fell apart, he didn't just give up. He found a new way to build his reality using the one part of his mind that was still perfectly whole.
And that anchor, for him, was music. For a man whose entire life and identity was built around music, melody and rhythm became his new set of eyes. They were the tools he used to navigate his new fragmented world.
And the way he did it was just extraordinary. He basically composed a soundtrack for his life. He had a little song for getting dressed. He had a song for eating his meals. You see, the continuous flow of the melody gave him the structure through time that he could no longer get from the visual world. But get this, if the music stopped mid-activity, he would just freeze, completely lost, until the song started again.
It's just such a powerful illustration of who he was. On the one hand, he lost the ability to recognize even the most basic things. But on the other, his core identity, his musical genius, his warmth, his spirit, all of that was still there. It just had to find a brand new way to exist, through sound. So, Section 5, The Ghost in Your Machine. Why does this bizarre story still resonate with us so much? Because what Dr. P went through tells us something absolutely fundamental about how all of our minds work, hidden just below the surface. And here is the single most important takeaway. We don't just see the world. We actively create it every single moment. Our reality isn't a photograph. It's more like a painting that our brain is constantly rendering. And that entire process is so much more fragile than any of us think. This is the terrifying lesson of Dr. P's life. One tiny misfire in the impossibly complex machine of the brain, and the most fundamental things, a shoe, a face, your own wife, can become totally unrecognizable. Your entire world can change in an instant. Which leaves us with one final, haunting question to sit with. We all place our complete, unquestioning trust in that architect inside our heads. But if it can make a mistake this profound, how can you ever be totally sure that the world you're seeing is the real one?